All right, our next talk is by Ryan Ware, and I'll have him do the riff.
Hey everybody, my name's Ryan Ware. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself here in a moment. I wanted to come and talk about and find out how can we help you, help us, help you, help us, help you. But before I dive into this, this is my first time coming to talk to the Debian community, even though I've been in open source for, it seems like forever. And I really wanted to say, you know, congratulations to this community. I've been watching it grow for 20 years, and it's been amazing to watch, and it's been pretty awesome, and I want to thank everybody. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm old. I started tech early. My first computer was an Atari 800, and actually watching Jonathan's talk about the Debian project leadership when he was talking about his Spectrum ZX, I also only started with 48K of RAM. And it's amazing the different ways you had to deal with just so little memory back then. And how many people here have seen the movie War Games? I had the audio coupler modem that he had in that movie. That was my connection to the outside world for like 3 years. Yay, 300 baud. When I went to college, I actually went to a university in Northern California, Chico State. It was well known to be a party school, but it was also the #2 computer science program in California. They had amazing labs, HPUX, QNX, IRIX, Solaris. I remember coming in after the summer, coming in to one of the labs, and they had changed it over the summer, and it was just one lab full of Next cubes. And I got to go play with those for a year, and that was really awesome. I worked at Intel for 22 years. I spent 7 of those years in Intel's Open Source Technology Center, where I was the security lead for 3 different Linux distributions, Moblin, MeeGo, and Tizen, all of which crashed very quickly, although Tizen's still technically alive. I also was a security lead for Intel's One Android, which was their Android distribution, as well as Zephyr, real-time OS. I'm currently at Western Digital, and I am focused on software supply chain security. And it's a very interesting and hard problem to crack. And I wanted to come talk to you all about it and see what we can do all together to help make the problem more tenable. So, I'm not sure how much of you all know about US politics, although it seems like US politics dominates a lot of the world. There was this lovely thing that happened in May 12th of 2021, where the US President, Joe Biden, issued Executive Order 14028. And this is an executive order basically defining what his vision is for cybersecurity. And, you know, people don't always understand how this impacts the rest of the country and the rest of the world, but whenever a president issues an executive order, everything in the executive branch of the U.S. has to follow it. So, you know, not only do things like the Department of Energy and in smaller departments like that have to comply, but big things like the U.S. military have to comply. And there's a whole bunch of information in this cybersecurity order, but one thing that affects us very much is that you have to have a software bill of materials. And I'll talk a little bit about how that affects Western Digital and how we might be able to help as a community to go make it easier for people incorporating products using Debian. And by the way, I understand that it always works when the US government says, thou shalt go do this. Nothing's ever gone wrong, ever. So what does this even mean? I mean, there's a lot of change that's going to be having to come here. So, any product purchased by the U.S. executive branch is going to be affected. And in a lot of cases, you don't know what's going to be purchased by them. The computing ecosystem is going to have to change here. So companies will need to know all about the software they're shipping. And you might think to yourself, don't they already know about all of the software they're shipping? How many people think that product teams in companies know all of the software they're shipping? Raise your hand. That's a smart ass right there. You would think that a product team knows about all of the software they're shipping, and it's shocking that they don't. At one point, I was working with some teams, and I was using some software composition analysis software to find out everything that they're shipping, and they were insisting they were only using OpenSSL 1.1.1K, I think it was. And I'm like, no, you're also shipping OpenSSL 0.97. And they're like, no, we're not. No, we're not at all. I'm like, look, here. And it's funny, one of the best tools to go figure out what version something is strings, of all things. And I'm like, here, run strings against your binary. Look, OpenSSL 0.97. And by the way, that's like 20 years old. And so they actually found it was in another binary that they include in what they ship in their product, but they didn't know it was in there. And that's just one instance of a problem. If you look at my nice little hypothetical software facts guide, you'll see a little complaint on there kind of about NPM, which I have to deal with a lot these days, where you have a team that pulls in like 7 NPM modules and they end up with 140, and they don't know what all of those are. And so it's kind of a problem. That said, I think it's a tenable problem, and there's some ways that we can go about dealing with this. And part of the reason for the whole executive order was the U.S. government was having a lot of problems with embedded systems. Embedded systems that were having security problems, but at the same time, they had absolutely no idea what was running on these embedded systems. To them, it was just a box running on the network. They have no idea what's on it. There's a new vulnerability in OpenSSL. Does it affect that? I don't know. And so, at the end of the day, they really want to be able to say, oh, there's a new OpenSSL vulnerability. We want to be able to show that, all of these systems are either vulnerable or not. And it's a great challenge, and it's a great idea. There's just going to be a lot of work to get there. So why should Debian care? I would say it's a very valid question. Debian is a community-driven project, and actually I think the embodiment of the best of the community-driven projects in the generating Linux distributions. There are many downstream communities and companies like Western Digital that are using Debian in their products. I am actually very happy that I showed up at Western Digital and found out that they're using Debian. I was like, awesome, this is great. We want to be able to continue using Debian as part of our product ecosystem. We want to make sure that Debian wants to, know all of the software that they're distributing, so that, we can end up knowing all the software we're distributing. I think Debian wants to make sure that they're expanding their community and not reducing it in any way. And, it's also an opportunity to show some good leadership. Sorry if I slur a little bit. To me, my body, it's 2 a.m. right now. I'm surprised I'm awake. Yay. So, software bill of materials, or SBOM. I do want to emphasize that sudo apt list -- installed redirect my.sbom is not an industry standard. That's not a way to actually generate a proper software bill of materials. There's actually 3 industry standards right now. There's SPDX, which is a Linux Foundation project. It has components in licenses and copyrights and security information. An example from the Kubernetes SPDX list is there. There's Cyclone DX, which was originated by OWASP and focused on vulnerability identification and supply chain component analysis. And then there's also SWID, which is really focused on commercial software. Please do not use SWID. I don't like it. It's horrible. But anyway, there's a number of different ways that these can be incorporated into Debian builds. I'm not here to propose a specific tool. There's actually lots of different tools out there. They have their pluses and minuses. I think it's a good discussion for us to go have on the mail lists. I could do a whole presentation about just the tools themselves, but I think there's some more important things to discuss today. There's the tools that Kubernetes uses for SPDX, which is a nice tool, but there's a bunch of others, and I think there should be a good discussion around what the community should be using. That said, I do want to talk about some things that people might find a little bit more controversial. I don't think necessarily generating SBOMs is all that controversial. I do think there's some other things that are more problematic and that the community's got to take a look at. There's a very unfortunate trend. I don't know how many of you follow security vulnerabilities. I do, just because I'm pathological. There is, just for those that don't live and breathe this every day, there is a organization in the United States called MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, that run the National Vulnerability Database for NIST, the National Institutes of something technology. They record all the publicly known vulnerabilities in software every year. And, this is the trend that we have seen in the total number of vulnerabilities that are being discovered every year. 1999, great, there was like 800 and something. Last year there were over 20,000. That comes to an average of 56.6 new vulnerabilities a day. It's funny, back in the days of when I was working on Moblin and Migo, I would used to track new vulnerabilities in our distributions by hand. It was actually pretty easy. You just subscribe to a number of mail lists and new issues pop up and you see them. I can't imagine trying to do that today. It would be a nightmare to try to go do that and keep up with the number of issues that are coming across. This year looks like it's going to be even worse. This year so far we're averaging 67.6 per day. And honestly, I don't see the growth of this slowing down anytime soon. There's a lot of incentive for security researchers to go find new vulnerabilities in the form of bug bounties. And a lot of the security researchers aren't necessarily playing by nice rules. For example, the SQLite folks last year got hit by a CVE that they can't get rid of, which was against something out of their master branch. It wasn't even in a release, and that's that's not right. That's not the way to be doing this. That said, it's really growing, and it's going to continue to keep growing like this. And I have mixed feelings about the whole process of CVEs and how they're scored with CVSS, critical, high, medium, and low, and how accurate any of that is. But that's the best system we have right now, and that's what we have to live with. We are literally drinking from the fire hose on all of this. In seeing some of this, I've actually been digging around a lot in the Debian security tracker, and I've found some things in there that concern me, and I'm going to give some examples here. I think we can do better, and I want to figure out how I can help us to do better. That said, I want to say specifically what I did to get my findings that I'm going to talk about here. So I have a Docker file that I use for my own personal development for Debian that I create. I actually used that to generate these statistics instead of one of our product Docker files, because it would probably take me a year for me to get management to the Docker file go. So I did want to get something for other people to be able to go use, to be able to go replicate what I have. And the Docker file, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, it just grabs upstream Debian 10. It checks for updates. It upgrades all of the outdated packages. And then it installs a number of different developmental packages. Nothing that is all too concerning. And when I go scan the resulting Docker container, and by the way, there's new vulnerabilities every day. The data here I generated at the very beginning of July, so it's probably already out of date. There's probably new vulnerabilities, but this is what the data was then. There were 74 vulnerabilities identified by Docker scan. And Docker scan, for those that don't know, uses the commercial solution Sneak. Sneak, from all of the data I have seen, basically steals all of the data from the security tracker and uses that for vulnerability identification. In that list, there were a number of items that were only reported by SNCC. They weren't public CVEs, so I stripped those out because I want to rely only on public data. So that was 66 vulnerabilities that were not in the proprietary, just in the proprietary SNCC database. Many of the 66 were actually brand new. They were, I would say, about a third of the vulnerabilities were only published within the last couple weeks. And like I said, SNCC, as far as I can tell, ultimately gets its data from the Debian security tracker. And I'm hoping that we can make the Debian security tracker better. And there's a number of classes of concerns that I have here. I really have the top 4 that I saw. There's a number of other little ones in there, but I really want to bring these ones to light. But first, I want to tell a little bit about a personal story, because some of the things I might bring up might be embarrassing to some people. I've tried to make sure they aren't, but I figure if it does, first of all, I'm sorry, and second of all, I'm going to embarrass myself first. So I want to tell a little bit about a story of my very first position when I was at Intel. I was on one of our servers on a terminal, and the server was actually having lots of problems. And I figured out real quick it was because it was out of disk space. And so I started poking around on it to go figure out what's filling up the disk. And I found a couple things and removed those, and did something else and removed some of those. and then I typed something to remove something else, and all of a sudden I got a whole bunch of text going across my screen. Has anybody ever typed something, expected to see something, and got something completely different? So it was going and going. I hit Control C and stop. And I realized what I had done was I was in the root directory, and I was removing a bunch of stuff, and by accident, instead of doing something and starring at the end, I actually put a space in before the star. So it was doing a recursive delete of everything from the root directory. I looked around real quick. /lib was gone, /bin was gone, it was all gone. And I got to see how long a Solaris system would keep running your processes without those libraries. It was about 2 minutes. Now the real embarrassing part is this was on a production server for our board manufacturing facility in Penang. And this is a facility that 1 minute of downtime costs $10,000. And so they had a lovely $100,000 bill for my group at Intel. And I got to go create a presentation to my management on how we'll never do that again. So, not that has anything to do with security, but I just wanted to share a little bit. Now, there's some things in the Debian security tracker that I've seen from those particular vulnerabilities, or from the vulnerabilities that I found that I want to bring up. So, a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but you will see CVEs generated these days from a number of open source projects where the first word in the CVE description is disputed. And it's almost always these days **, disputed in caps, ***. And, the SQLite CVE I was talking about earlier is one of these. This particular glibc issue, the remapping library with malicious elf file, CVE 2019-10100023, is also one of these. I really believe a CVE disputed by its community should not be counted as a vulnerability, no matter what the National Vulnerability Database says. If the community has not accepted the vulnerability, you have no idea if it's vulnerable or not. All you know is somebody has said, here, I think it's vulnerable, give me a CVE for it. And it's unfortunate, but we have a lot of communities that get hit by these, and they are suddenly stuck with something they're disputing and suddenly won't go away. And really, I don't think it should be counted. There are many reasons why well-meaning security researchers report issues that aren't real problems. They don't necessarily understand the code base. They don't understand what it's supposed to be doing. And this leads to inaccurate assessment that Debian is vulnerable. I get my customers coming to me and saying, well, you're vulnerable to this particular CVE, and I'm like, we aren't. Here, let me go explain why. And half the time, they don't even want to hear why it's not vulnerable. They just want it fixed. And I can't blame them for that. They don't have visibility into everything we're doing. And, if it was me, I would just want it fixed too. One variation of disputed, by the way, is functions as expected. I do see a lot of security researchers that have submitted CVEs, and in the communities like, yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. Let's do it that way. So I would really love to see the security tracker stop counting these CVEs as vulnerabilities. The next one I see is I see CVEs that are about vulnerabilities that aren't actually shipped in Debian binary packages. Debian gets flagged for issues it simply can't be vulnerable to in the security tracker. if the binary is not shipped, I can understand, for example, in the security tracker, it's saying that the source package might be vulnerable. But, if the binary is not shipped, there is no binary that should get flagged as being vulnerable. It's just the way it should be. I also see comments that the vulnerability is in the test suite, not in the binaries that get shipped. And that's great. That shouldn't be counted as vulnerability either. I also see that the vulnerable feature is not enabled, and that, of course, shouldn't be counted as a vulnerability either. At the same time, the security tracker claims they're vulnerabilities, and the Debian community is getting hit by that. So I would love to determine how we can get more accurate info into the security tracker on issues like this. This one's going to be a little bit more uncomfortable as well as the next one. This one's kind of an elephant in the room for me. I see a lot of issues that in the security tracker are labeled as minor issue. This particular CVE is a perfect example of it. CVE 2020-19498. LibHive allows attackers to cause denial of service. Of the 66 issues I had, 26 or 39% are marked as minor issues. I don't dispute that it might be a minor issue. I'd be very happy if it's a minor issue. The question that I always try to figure out is why, and there's almost never an explanation. There's never a Debian bug. There's never if I go look through the lists for the CVE, I don't really see any discussion of it. It's just marked as a minor issue, and it's not going to be fixed. And I don't know why. I need to know why. If it's really a minor issue, I'm happy with that. If it's not, and we need more resources to go actually fix it, and we're just kind of hiding the possibility that it's actually something that's exploitable, I mean, we need to go figure out that problem. In LibHive, this particular issue is CVSS 8.8, high severity. And the patch is really relatively unobtrusive. I patched it myself in a test environment and did a series of tests against it, and it didn't seem to cause any regressions at all. It was 2 files that got patched. It added 9 lines and removed 43. Pretty simple. That said, this is a issue that's been around since I think technically the patch was 2019, CVE 2020, but Debian 10 is still vulnerable. I would love to figure out ways that we can help fix this particular problem and get more fixes in for issues like this. And this is another thing that I saw that at first it really irked me. I see the phrase crash and CLI tool, no security impact, without any explanation. Now, there is, these were for mostly development tools. The example I put here is a CVE for Vim, CVE 2022-2287, out of bounds read in Vim prior to 9.0. And by the way, for those that haven't been paying attention, Vim has been getting hit hard by new CVEs. I think it's like 32 in the last year, and which is like more than they've had in their entire history before then. And that's great. If we want to call out, development tools, no security impact for them, well, that's fine if we want to do that as a community. I would personally not want to have developers be in a position where they might get exploited if they open a untrusted file of some kind. But at the same time, I think we need to make sure that we have a policy, defined around this on what we're supposed to do with these kinds of vulnerabilities. When I searched for this term against the Debian security tracker in Google, I found 178 instances of this phrase. Like I said, many issues were related to dev tools. Others were like libtiff, which is not so much just a command line tool. Libtiff is used in a number of different production scenarios. I think I even saw one for image magic, and that's used all over the place too. If we're going to exclude things like this, we should be clearer as a community about why and the reasons therefore. And finally, I just want to wrap up and talk about really what I'm asking. First of all, can the community put in place tooling to generate SBOM information? Please, if we do, let's use SPDX or CycloneDX. Please don't use SWID. I will buy beers to everybody here tonight if we all agree SWID is off the table. More importantly, is it possible to get Security Tracker to give more accurate information reflecting the real issues with the vulnerabilities? I would be more than happy to do whatever I can to help with that. I'm new to this community. I'm in the process of becoming a Debian developer. My management really want me to be involved in Debian. I'm a 25-year industry expert in security. If there's something I can do to help, I'm here. Please let me know. And not only do I care about impacting Western Digital, I really want to impact the industry as a whole. Let's make it better. So with that said, if there's something I can do to help, please let me know. And if you all have questions, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great talk. Thanks for going through this. It mirrors very closely what I see. I'm part of a development team for a product, and I am part of the team that picks up CVEs. We ingest the Debian Security Tracker data. I know we've had this conversation already, but I'm sharing with other people.
Thank you.
It's painful sometimes to see the number of CVEs that are opened this year, and you'll see that because of the bug bounty type of approach, you'll see one actual class of vulnerability, but 10 CVEs open because people have found it in this line and this line and this line and this line in the same project. That really needs to stop, but I don't know how we do it.
Yeah, it's definitely a big problem. They are technically individual vulnerabilities, and those need to be tracked. But at the same time, here, let's go slap this open source project with 10 different vulnerabilities that they now have to go deal with, which they don't really understand the CVE process in the beginning a lot of times anyway. Yeah, exactly. And then equally, we also have exactly the same issue as you do with, yes, that vulnerability is in the source package. On our VM images, for example, we have to ship some of the libraries that come with bind. Lots of people do because we need to do DNS lookup. We never run the server, but of course our customers see, oh, hang on, look, Debian has this in the bind source code because there's a bug in the bind servers. And it's, please, no. And our support team can sometimes spend half of their day explaining the same bug to the same customer, saying, yes, we know there's a CVE, no, we're not vulnerable, really believe us, just because someone has run a really dumb third-party security scanning tool doesn't mean that the answers it gives are correct. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Ryan, for an excellent talk and beautiful slides. My question, I apologize if I'm speaking as a novice and maybe not understand the problem space well enough, but I want to pose a fairly general question and then ask your take on that. What I see in Debian is quite often, I'm asking the audience as well, because perhaps you as experts have better answers than Ryan, but I don't know. what I see often is a pattern of software installation occurring within Debian, which is add a couple of extra unknown providers to your sources list somehow, through the directory or just through the sources list file. You don't really know where that comes from, and then suddenly extra apt install things happen. And it's all a bit magical and a bit difficult for the end user to account for. This manifested itself in a case, Raspberry Pi, I think a year ago, where Microsoft had a way to add, I think it was Visual Studio Code into Raspberry Pi. And what happened was then, unbeknown to the end user, your sources list gets changed by what they did. And I felt so uncomfortable about seeing that result because I like to keep my sources list extremely clean, extremely minimal. I trust Debian totally, but I don't know how I can trust all these others. And I see this pattern occurring so often that I think if you install 60 strange things that are not part of Debian, you'll have 60 extra entries in your sources list. This in turn then causes, I think, a supply chain vulnerability. And that supply chain vulnerability is that if any of those, let's say 60 strange sources that you're not familiar with, become compromised in any way, then through no fault of their own, except that they are not skilled enough in their own security, are those sources not vulnerable to overriding any of the Debian packages that we may have installed, which we do trust, through some higher version which some strange repository has now published through some malware. And so that's a problem that I see, and hence I'm very reluctant to expose my sources that much. And it was highlighted in the case of the Raspberry Pi, but it's a far more generic situation or issue, I think.
May I ask you to come to your question, please?
Yes, I will do that. And that is, Ryan, please, having described that generic situation, am I not understanding how these things work, or is that also a concern?
So I would say that it is also a concern in this aspect. So anytime a line gets added to your sources, it's not necessarily clear that it is happening. For example, if you add the Deb for Visual Studio, it adds its own line in there so that it can keep itself updated. At the same time, there is this concept in security of keeping your attackable surface area as reduced as possible. If you have added something that you've included and you aren't really using it, then that's just an avenue for you to become compromised in some way or another. I think it needs to be clear sometime to new end users of Debian-based Linux systems that they are taking a risk when they add something in like that. But inherently, it's not bad. That's the way that you do want Visual Studio Code to be updated. You do hope that Microsoft is doing the right thing. Everybody makes mistakes, and the more things you have listed in there, the more chance you have of somebody making a mistake that affects what you're doing. So, sure.
We have a question from IRC. Based on all of this and how scary it sounds for a beginner, do you think Debian is something for Linux beginners?
I do. As long as, so I think sometimes new users might have a bit of a hurdle when it comes to installing. The install process, to be honest, I haven't installed Debian in a little while. I mostly use it in Docker images these days. But when you're doing the install process, it's not necessarily as smooth as other distributions. So from that aspect, it might be a bit of a problem for new users. But as long as they are keeping themselves up to date after they install, then they are sharing no more risk than anybody else at this point. And so and Debian, although I've highlighted some issues here, Debian one of the most security conscious distributions out there. So,
Absolutely. Thank you very much. More questions? I think we've almost done.
So you're posing quite a few questions during the talk, and maybe I can give a partial answer. Is there something we can do to help? The security tracker repository actually gives commit rights to every Debian developer. You really can commit there, and we've added non-developers there as well. So you can actually fix the data. And given the numbers you presented, I feel it is kind of unsurprising that the data is not being updated that frequently, given that the security team hasn't grown in the same way as the security vulnerability rate.
right.
So really, you can file bugs, you can record them, you can improve explanations. It really is relatively simple.
Good. I'd like to help doing that.
Cool. And another area we need help with is video volunteers. Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for Ryan Ware?
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate the time.